to talk or meet the pastor who purchased your soul? If so, how was it?
Yeah, I have. We met a few times. He was really interesting because he was an ex-pastor and he wasn't pastoring anymore. But what he did is, as a former pastor, he was really sick of the way church worked. And he was kind of annoyed that all these churches would say, it's our goal to reach out to unchurched people, and yet they did things that would totally turn people off. So what he did in his ministry, called Off the Map, is he would find unchurched people and say, hey, listen, are you doing anything for the next couple hours? I'll give you $25 if you go to that church, sit in that service, and fill out the survey for me. That's it. Then you can leave. I'm not going to bother you after that. And the questions on this survey would be like, what did you think of the sermon? What did you think of the seats you were sitting in? Were you comfortable? How was the choir? How was the music? Did you connect to anything emotionally? Would you come back to this church? And after all these people would fill out these surveys, he would take them and go to the pastor and say, listen, you want your church to reach out to unchurched people? Well, here's what they think about you, so what are you going to do about it? And so when he found out that I was doing this auction, he was all over it. But yeah, I had a chance to talk to him. We still talk every now and then. We probably have now one of those once-a-year relationships too. But we do get in contact, and I think we were both on the same page. He even told me, if during the process of going to all these churches, if you convert and become a Christian, that's fantastic. But that's not on my time. That's something you'll do on your own. What he wanted to know is, look, maybe because of this auction and maybe some of the publicity going on around it, maybe you could show a lot of Christians what you're experiencing when you go there. And you could show a lot of atheists that Christians aren't as, the boogeymen they're made out to be all the time.
I had sort of the same experience, but with Christians, where when I first came here, which was only 3 years ago, I would meet with every person that walked in the door and left, and would go with them and say, no, I'm not here on a sales pitch to try to get you to come back to my church. I want to know just what did you see? What did it feel like? Who was there? What did you experience? How did that reflect what you thought about God or felt about God? And it was, for me, a wonderful chance to get that third-person perspective where we don't have that that relationship that needed to be tenuous, that honesty could come forth because it wasn't so hard with one another. And I, to this day, I was telling Hemant earlier, my particular tribe in Christianity is Lutheran, and I remember asking this waitress who had come and said, asked, so what do you think of when you hear the word church? What do you think of when you hear the word Christian? What do you think of? And a variety of responses. And I said, what do you think of when you hear the word Lutheran? And she's like, old, dusty, hard, boring. And I'm like, and then I think a part of me not only smiled and laughed, but also honored that to be, I think, truth of what a lot of people might hear when they thought that.
I was, telling Jay too, at one of this church brought me in to talk to the congregation about things I had experienced in churches. And before I went on, they were going to do a whole series on what people think about Christians and how we, the church as Christians, could change that. And they played this video where they did man-on-the-street interviews, and it was nicely put together, but basically there would be this cameraman saying, hey, person on the street, what do you think when you hear the word Christian? And yeah, every now and then someone would say nice things, but mostly you heard homophobic, they're judgmental, they're anti-women, they're Republican, and just all these things. And every time like they said something negative, they were like, they're homophobic. You would see the whole church like, oh my God, like, judgmental, what, hypocrites? Never. And it was just funny because I'm listening to that like, yeah, that's pretty much what everyone I talk to thinks. And it's not new to me. And it's interesting to see churches that, I love when I see churches and hear about churches that are addressing that firsthand and trying to say, look, this is not who we are. We need to fix that though, because that's the image you hear.
Or more so that we say, yeah, that's who we are. We're judgmental and hypocrites, and we're homophobes, and we do the wrong things, and we're sorry.
Yeah.
That's the other side. Is as a Christian, it's acknowledging the brokenness and saying that need to reconcile that brokenness. And I think that requires something that that feeling to me addresses. I have a lot of issues within the church as well, and one of the big ones for me is just the issue of humility and desiring more humility to be honest about who we are and what we are, and saying, Yeah, I have this shirt I used to make my own T-shirts. I'd just take markers and write on them because I like them. And I wrote on one, it says, "As a white heterosexual Christian male, I would like to apologize for everything we've ever done." And it wasn't sarcastic at all. And while I couldn't apologize, there is a sense in which whether we call the Crusades a Christian action, and kind of veiled in that, I think it had a lot more political, land grabbing, economic things. We simply throw the religious thing on there, but because that religious thing gets thrown on there, I get put into that. I do have a sense in which humility means to me apologizing to those who have had that horrible experience. When the Jesus that I know the Jesus I know gets mad at the other Christians, not at the non-Christians. The Jesus I know is angry at the religious people, and the Jesus I know had infinite patience for those who wouldn't be within his own tribe. But for those within his own tribe, he had no patience for them whatsoever. He'd kick over their tables, yell, scream, and that's often how I feel within my own family, wanting to yell, scream, saying, "Wake up!"